Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of our Digital Dialogue series. I'm joined this afternoon by Barrett Wright, President of Hill Robinson USA. Barrett, hello, how are you?
I'm good. Well, how are you doing?
I'm very well, thanks, very well. Thank you for joining us. I know, obviously, at this time of year, particularly in your part of the world, it's a very busy time. So how are things at the moment?
Things are very, very, very busy. If you look at the marinas and you look at the shipyards, there's packed. There's barely any room to breathe. I think right now people are sort of in a marshaling area to figure out whether there's going to be the Caribbean season. I know that there's a lot of interest out there, and I think people are waiting just a little bit to finally commit, to going down there for the Christmas New Year's season. But plenty of interest. We've got plenty of boats here in Florida. Looking out of our office in Palm Beach, all it is white and blue as far as you can see. So, market's doing pretty well here, I have to say.
Well, that's really nice to hear, actually, because I think obviously it's been such a topsy-turvy year worldwide, not just for yachting, but just in general terms. And it's really it's tested the mettle of every single market, whatever industry you operate in. So I think for many people, when as we touch wood, begins to return to some semblance of normality over the coming months, the Caribbean charter season will certainly represent one of the first opportunities to gauge yachting activity. So personally, based on everything that you're doing at the moment and the clients that you're working with, what are your expectations for the coming charter season?
I think that, people are getting tired, here. I think there's just constantly, the bad news, fear that you're going to go to the grocery store and you're going to wind up with COVID. You're going to just, I think people are looking forward more to the idea of being further away. I think the privacy that is allowed through the vessels and through private aviation, are things that are going to be things that people will grasp onto. I think the year is, what the year has been. So, in the United States, we've just lost out on Thanksgiving. People couldn't get together. So I think with Christmas and New Year's, really big celebratory times, those who can, do the yachts and consider, getting away with the family to the Caribbean, I think that that's something that people are going to turn to. And I think you'll see that more, in the Bahamas as the resorts are starting to open up. We've got opening days for Baja Mar and for Nassau, Albany, all of those places. So, with those locations, really starting to make themselves available, even if on a smaller scale, to guests and trying to encourage guests, I think people will take advantage of that. Similarly down in the Caribbean, we found that it's very organized. Each island has set up its own set of protocols, with welcoming people in, trying to stay safe. The one thing that I think, is a little bit of a hindrance is sort of the choreography that has to go with moving between the islands. So it's not like guests have to be tested every single day at every single island. So I think you have to be very strategic, the captains do, with how they're going to move so that, the testing doesn't, interfere with their itinerary on a daily basis. But it's something certainly that they have to consider for sure. And so I think that's the one thing that, could be a little bit of a hang up, but not a huge one based on what I've seen with captains doing so far.
That's a really interesting point, actually, you touched upon, because obviously, as well as the sort of appetite and the broader market stuff that we talk about, there are so many practical considerations that we now have to begin to take into, and particularly from your perspective in terms of the management process. Mm-hmm. It's probably too exhaustive to list them all, but in terms of from a client side, but also from a crew side, what should people be considering in terms of practical factors that they must work into the operation of the vessel this coming season?
Well, I think that obviously you have to be 100% up to date with the travel. With the travel restrictions, also with the testing restrictions, depending upon the places you go. Here to go to the Bahamas, you have to have a PCR test to go over, and then within 5 days, and then you arrive and you do a rapid antigen test. And, what happens if you were fine when you left the United States and then you arrive and all of a sudden, you find yourself having tested positive. Okay, is it, party over? And so I think that that's the one thing that people are concerned with potentially committing to, a charter or committing to travel, because things are changing on a day-to-day basis. And I think there's a lot of that, concern, that big what if question out there, is making people a little bit nervous. It's interesting for us to try and travel to our vessels and visit our vessels, because we are trying to, visit. There's a lot of factors there that are sort of beyond our control, which is something that I think, people are trying to take into consideration. We know as much as we know, but it's one of those things that it's a moment to moment, circumstance, and, there is no control over it. We found that people have traveled, they landed, they're fine, COVID negative, everything. And then a couple of days later, when they wind up on the island after the plane trip, if they've flown commercially, boom, they find themselves with a positive test. So that changes things, infinitely for their experience. And then obviously with that, if they've been on board boats or anything like that, now they've exposed, the crews. So it's a little bit of the ripple effect that comes into play. So I think that what if factor is a huge consideration for people, both for managers as well as for, clients and charter managers, who are looking to keep the boats busy.
In terms of, from your perspective, do you have to allay the fears of clients in terms of working or being on board a boat where they don't necessarily know the crew? Because obviously once you enter that sort of situation with a charter situation, you're stepping on board to a boat that you don't know with a crew you don't know. And I suppose perhaps this year more than any other, that sort of unfamiliarity between people may cause a bit of concern. So is that something that fear that you may have to allay with a potential charter client?
Well, that's the one thing so we as safety managers are 100% responsible that the clients are getting on board a boat that is safe. With our fleet, we have COVID protocol that is updated regularly. We have it updated based on each region, where we are. Obviously, people are concerned, with Florida being one of the U.S. hotspots. But we do have our protocol. There's a series of checklists that people have to, answer, acknowledge before they, travel to the boats. Obviously, with the crew, we have them tested. We have them, sanitization going on board the boats, their protocol when they greet the guests. And so I think from, my point of view, any client who is going to get on board, one of our fleet boats or, any of the fleet boats that are out there right now, I think any of the yacht managers being the safety managers, it is intrinsic for us to make sure that people are confident to make sure that they are getting on something safe, because that is our number one goal. That is our number one responsibility. So I think that combined with the private portion of it, that, anybody who does get on board should feel 100% safe, because we are under so many different regulations. We've got local regulations, we've got what each flag state is requiring, we've got what each local destination is requiring, as well as, just what we required as far as, our crew go and the safety of the vessel. So, I would say that anybody getting on board a yacht should really feel confident that they are going to be safe.
So I guess safety considerations aside, obviously they're absolutely paramount, but how much of a headache is it in practical terms with the actual movement of people at the moment? And by that, I primarily mean the crew. Obviously you can legislate for the charter, but the multinational yacht crews and the movement at the moment with various travel restrictions, how much of a headache is that?
I used to have long hair and now I have short hair. So it has been quite a headache and a huge frustration. And really, once you think that you've sorted it out, there's something on the other side that holds you back. And so like right now, obviously being in the United States, there's the presidential proclamation where you can only travel to the United States, on business. And so therefore, everybody must have a B1 visa if they are going to enter the United States. And so it's great for those who have their, brand new issued last year or earlier this year, 10-year visa, they're free and clear. But it's kind of difficult for those whose visas are now coming due, are expiring. And so it's very hard for them to be able to go and, get those visas renewed, throughout the world, because there are certain embassies that are processing the B1 visa and then others that are not. So you have to be very selective with where they are. And I mean, things can change on a dime, depending upon blanket restrictions that are issued by the State Department. So we've gotten a little creative with how and where we can do that. And then plus understanding that somebody's visa might be expiring, we have to be very strategic with how they enter the US and make the most of their I-94 stay. So even if a visa has expired during that, we try to be strategic until they can get that visa appointment to make sure that we can get the most of, that their visa expires while they're here, they're legal to stay until the last date of their I-94 stamp in. So, we can try and work with some of the flexibility there, but we, certainly have to be, it's a choreograph, and it's an exercise in creative thinking and, letter writing and trying to put together valued arguments to see more success. We try to send kids home, but again, going to certain locations like Australia, you're $2,800 out of pocket and you get to hang out in a hotel for 14 days. So, there's some of those things. It's great to get there, hard to get back, or it's hard to get there, kind of okay to come back. So there's a lot of timing that we need to consider right now, and expense, too, related with trying to get people traveling incident free. All crew members have a discharge book. So that's kind of helpful as far as the seafarer is.
Absolutely. You obviously mentioned various regulatory factors there, and in terms of the American regulatory standpoint, landscape. Sorry, how is it? Is it conducive, would you say, to our industry at the moment? I know that with any government, it's a constant lobbying process to correct misconceptions, but in your interpretation, the US regulatory landscape at the moment, is it yachting friendly? Are there areas that, because I know you're also part of the International Super Yacht Society, and there's a lot of positive work that you guys do from a lobbying standpoint. So from your side, do you feel that we're in a good place with the government and regulations and how they're applied to yachting?
I think that apart from travel and entry restrictions, I think that, yes, we are. In the state of Florida, it's business as usual, despite the fact that we're seeing rises in cases and the state's about to hit 1 million cases. As far as people are concerned, we've got an economy to look after and we've got jobs to do. And that's pretty much what's going on. And I think that's a little bit, to a degree, detrimental because, we do see that when everybody's sitting, within the shipyards and everybody's packed and there's technicians that are working between the boats and, crew, trying to, go around, exercise, interacting with each other. It's kind of hard to avoid, the potential spread of things because at least as far as those entering the shipyard, we have no idea what they do when they go home at night, things like that. So all that we really can mandate is, okay, the temperature checking, make sure everybody wears a mask, make sure the sanitization is going on. But, there is only so much that's under that control. And, in the States, it's as the president said, he's not shutting things down again. So I think it's up to, each individual in each location to try and do what they can to, contain it and sort of prevent any further outbreaks while still trying to get the job done. So as far as yachting is concerned, Florida is not doing anything to prevent it. I know other states are a little bit more difficult with even entry into them, traveling between the states. But, as far as Florida is concerned, it's, come one, come all.
So you mentioned the one potential pitfall at the moment is the restrictions with the entry into and out of US waters. Is that in reference to the B1, B2 visas that you were talking about before?
Yeah, I think it's more through air travel, crew traveling, repatriation, or joining flights, vacation flights, bringing them in. There is no limitation with bringing the boats in. We find that boats that have arrived from overseas, they'll all come and just do COVID tests for the sake of, whether they're picking up a charter or they're about to take off to, the Bahamas, let's say. So I think as far as the boats moving, and it's fine. And obviously crew, arriving in the States on the boats, it's, easy for them to, come in, no problem. It's just a little bit different when you're trying to coordinate, crew coming and going, rotational crew, things like that. That's when it becomes a little bit of a headache.
And the visa situation, it seems to me, coming sort of at it from an objective perspective and potentially a layman's perspective on everything, the visa situation seems to have been a perennial hot potato in the context of the American industry. It's a sort of topic that doesn't seem to go away. I suppose my question's twofold. A, is it that much of a headache in reality? Is it from your perspective a hassle? And B, is there any sign of resolution on that?
I think in normal circumstances, it is not. I think if everybody is honest, if everybody explains things, if people, crew members go into their appointments with an understanding of how the boat operates, in particular, she is not commercial within U.S. waters. I am a resident somewhere else, and I have proof of it. I'm not looking to establish, residency or stay in the U.S. I'm here to do my job. I think that is half the battle. And like I said, whenever we've got people that are applying, use us as your U.S. contact, we're your connection to it. And that's the nice thing, I think, with Hill Rob is that we do have so many offices globally. And so we are able to help each other out with, movements, Schengen visas, all of that stuff as well. We're looking to go to the Mediterranean. So to me, with the proper paperwork, with the yes, ma'am, no, sir, politeness and being very forthright with, your answers and not trying to pull the wool over people's eyes. I think there's, your success rate's 95%. And then I also think that it's up to the crew members to really be cognizant of, once they are granted access to the U.S., really paying attention to expiration dates. Don't overstay your visit here, because that's going to have a detrimental effect. Either, have your visa voided, taken away, and then you have to wait 10 years until you get another chance to apply. So I think as long as people are, playing by the rules with it, to me, there isn't a whole lot in the way of hassles. The only issue is this year, obviously, with really limited access to the embassies and the processing. To me, that's been the real headache. But otherwise, you play by the rules, there is no problem, and based on my experience.
So I suppose, although it's somewhat easy pickings, it would be remiss of me not to mention for a Fort Lauderdale-based stakeholder the recent change in U.S. administration, or the forthcoming change, I should say. Obviously, you're based in one of yachting's most significant epicenters in Florida. Do you feel, not necessarily from a personal perspective, but from a professional perspective, and gauging your clients' appetite for yachting, that this will not have a negative impact on our market, particularly in terms of obviously the very active Florida and Caribbean charter market?
I don't think so. You look right now at, the stock market hit 30,000 points, set a record, and I know that a lot of that is based on, I think that the political landscape has sort of settled a little bit as far as we know, who the next president is going to be. We are dealing with a little bit of the shenanigans about, with the transfer of power and things like that. We get over it. But I think everybody is really satiated by the fact that there is the vaccine on the horizon. It is accessible. It is there. The first, I think, transport of them were completed last night. The first plane had landed, and I think that that's all stuff that is reassuring people. And I know that before all this stuff hit, the U.S. market was robust. I think we were the ones that were really sort of leading the charge here. And, we saw the stock market take a dive, and I think that was all the nervousness. But, I think that we're still, going back up again. And I think our target clientele, the high net worth individuals, largely, were not hugely affected by it. Obviously there were some that were more consumables, entertainment, maybe beauty and things like that could have been hit. And we know that there was definitely that action. But I think a lot of people, they're who they are and as wealthy as they are, because I think they kind of pay attention to things and they don't do knee-jerk reactions. And so I think overall, for now, I think it'll be great. I think that even if the tax climate changes, there's a new, tax regulations implemented. I don't know that that's going to have anything, real effect on the stratospheric wealth. I truly believe that at least the U.S. is in a good place, and the fact that there's the vaccination coming in, that there's options, that they're going to be able to, take care of everybody. I think that that is more reassuring than anything else. And I think it's great for us. I also think that, innovation is something that's got everybody's attention now. And so I think as people are, either purchasing their boats or looking to, build boats, I think that there's the whole environmental awareness that's there. Let's try and make things more efficient. The experience, the adventure, everything like that is stuff that people are looking for. So to me, I think that just adds to the excitement of the industry. And I think it's something that's going to help it, in the long run, and keep it going. So to me, I think that there's a lot of stuff to look forward to as we go forward. And then also, looking at, even management, in 2008, when there was the global crisis there, the recession, the Great Recession, with management, it was good. What do we need to do to take care of our boats? How are we going to do this? I think that for us, it's been great, with these circumstances is because, people do rely a little bit more on the managers now to guide them and how to handle things effectively, how to handle things cost effectively. How can we make this efficient, based on, circumstances? What is the best advice? How should we proceed for the next couple of months? And so from that point of view, it's been an interesting dialogue between our clients, with what is the best steps forward without sort of a knee-jerk reaction. All right, I'm selling it all. I'm just going to mothball everything. We're done. Let's just kind of take a deep breath. Let's see how things are going to go. And here are your options. And so I think that's the one, interesting thing for us is I think the problem solving and presenting, options to people rather than just a flat out, no, this all you can do. So to me, I think it's been a really dynamic time.
Well, that's actually a beautiful segue because we always close our one-to-one discussions by asking the participants what their outlook is for the future of the market. And you used some very positive language, and I feel that sort of as we approach certainly the end of 2020, we're all starting to feel that shift in time and that feeling of optimism. So as you look to 2021 and beyond, what are your expectations for our industry's health, prosperity, and the market's trajectory moving forward?
To me, like if you were asking me in March at the very beginning of everything in April, oh gosh, what's going to go on? I didn't even know where to start. In the beginning, it's like, owners all, upset. How am I going to cut costs? How do I do the CARES Act? How can I, what options here? And I think that nervousness is just kind of, passed along and you couldn't avoid it. But I think as we went through and again, kind of taking a step back and looking at the big picture, I think it's it was something that we had to learn to deal with. And I think, dealing with adversity like this is great because it makes you think outside the box. And yes, we can figure out how to make this work. That's something that I love on the problem solving of things, something that seems very intimidating. You're going to figure it out. There is a way to make this work as best we can, and say yes, as close as we can. I think that there's, as we saw, with the Super Yacht Awards design, everything, I think it is really exciting because I think the innovation, with building boats, is something that's great. And I think that environmental footprints, is something that everybody is really, aware of. I just think that going forward in order to sustain things, and I just think that, people are so in tune with it. And I think that because there are more younger people that are getting involved within the industry, those now who do have the money and who are the new clientele, the children of, current owners, the next heirs, things like that. I think that, having something cool that hasn't been done before is something that is really, addictive. And I think people, are always going to be pushing the envelope for it. And, to me, it's exciting. It's sort of my generation now is coming in and the decision makers. And I think it's really, really, fascinating. I think it's exciting. And I have to maintain a positive attitude because this is what I've been doing for the past 10 years. And it's something that I want to do for the next 10 years. So, I've got to maintain that this is exciting. There's, new challenges and not to be intimidated by those challenges.
Well, it's always wonderful to hear such a positive and an optimistic outlook for moving forward. And I think, as I said before in the conversation, it's a unique insight into one of the key markets. Obviously, the charter market is one of what I'd say the catalysts to market growth further along the chain. So to hear that you have such a positive outlook for the coming months and years ahead, hopefully, that is really encouraging. So Barrett, I'd love our time together, and thank you very much for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you. Thanks.
Thank you. Likewise. Thank you for the invitation.
Thanks. Bye-bye.